Kawhi Leonard is a two-time NBA champion, known as one of the quietest, most drama-free stars in the league. No headlines, no controversy, just trophies. This man is the opposite of all of that. His name is Joe Sanberg, and on June 1st, 2026, he was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison for a $248 million fraud. These two men had no business ending up in the same story. But in April of 2022, they landed on the same payroll. Sanberg's company, a green bank called Aspiration, paid Kawhi Leonard $28 million, and the NBA is now investigating whether that payment was ever really about endorsements, or whether it was one of the most expensive magic tricks in the history of professional sports. Kawhi is not the one they are most worried about. His billionaire owner is. This is the story of a company that promised to save the planet, stole $250 million, and pulled back the curtain on a single question the league still has to answer. Did the richest owner in sports find a side door around the one rule everybody else has to follow? To understand how an NBA superstar ended up tangled in a federal fraud case, you first have to understand Aspiration. Aspiration was a bank for people who felt guilty about banking. Founded in 2013 by a man named Joe Sanberg, it sold one clean promise. Put your money here, and it will never fund an oil pipeline. Spend with us, and every time you swipe your card, we will round up your change and plant a tree with it. It was banking as a personality. You were not a customer, you were a good person. And the beautiful people came. Leonardo DiCaprio invested. So did Robert Downey Jr., Orlando Bloom, and Drake. Aspiration signed Meta and Microsoft as partners. It talked openly about ending poverty and saving the climate, one debit card at a time. Joe Sanberg was the prophet of all of it. He went on television as the friendly face of conscious capitalism. He was a Democratic megadonor who hosted senators and presidential candidates in his home. And by 2021, his feel-good little bank was preparing to go public on the New York Stock Exchange at a valuation of $2.3 billion. He was, by every appearance, one of the good ones. That was the appearance. Here is what the appearance was hiding, according to the Securities and Exchange Commission and Sanberg's own guilty plea. The trees were the first lie. Aspiration advertised that it had planted 35 million trees. The real number in the ground was closer to 12 million. The company later admitted in a footnote that its count included trees it had merely promised to plant someday. But you do not go to prison for rounding up on trees. The real fraud was the money. Aspiration was not making money, so Sanberg invented some. Prosecutors say he recruited his own friends and business associates to pose as paying customers, signing them up for millions of dollars in tree planting services they never really bought. Then, quietly, he paid their invoices himself, with his own money funneled through so that the company could record it as revenue. Read that again. Aspiration was buying its own product with the founder's cash and calling it sales. Then it got bolder. To raise more money, Sanberg and a board member pledged Aspiration stock as collateral for $145 million in loans. And to make that collateral look good enough, prosecutors say they falsified bank and brokerage statements, inflating the board members' wealth on paper, so the lenders would say yes. And then the centerpiece. When investors wanted proof the company was healthy, Sanberg produced a letter from Aspiration's own audit committee, certifying that it had $250 million in cash sitting in the bank. The company had less than $1 million. He did not lose $249 million. He typed it. A house of cards does what houses of cards do. In early 2024, the Justice Department and federal commodity regulators started asking about the trees. By 2025, the questions had become a criminal case. The $2.3 billion stock market debut never happened. In March of 2025, Aspiration filed for bankruptcy and was carved up for parts. The entire company, the one worth billions on paper just a few years earlier, sold for a $20 million credit bid. On October 20th, 2025, Joe Sanberg pleaded guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud. And on June 1st, 2026, a federal judge sentenced him to 14 years in prison. His victims lost at least $248 million. That part is settled, proven, adjudicated. A man lied about saving the world, and he is going to prison for it. But this is the racket, and the settled part is never the interesting part. Because one of the people who lost money inside Aspiration was not a retiree or a pension fund. It was the richest owner in the NBA. And the story of how he lost it is the one the league is still trying to untangle. Steve Ballmer is worth more than $100 billion. He owns the Los Angeles Clippers, and he was an Aspiration true believer. Ballmer personally poured in around $60 million. His Clippers signed a 23-year, $300 million deal, to make Aspiration the founding partner of their brand new arena, the Intuit Dome, which they proudly called the most sustainable arena in sports. When Aspiration collapsed, Ballmer lost every dollar of that $60 million. On paper, he is a victim, exactly like DiCaprio and everyone else. But here's the wire that runs from the fraud straight onto the basketball court. In April of 2022, Aspiration signed an endorsement deal with a company called KL2 Aspire. KL2 Aspire belongs to Kawhi Leonard. The deal was worth about $28 million over 4 years. For a while, that was just another celebrity endorsement. Then in September of 2025, a reporter named Pablo Torre published a story built on more than 3,000 pages of Aspiration's internal documents, and it was explosive. According to Torre's reporting and to former Aspiration employees, Kawhi's $28 million deal may have been a no-show job. The allegation is that Leonard was never really expected to do much endorsing at all. One finance employee says they were told not to ask questions about the payments because the deal existed to get around the NBA salary cap. Torre also reported that the contract included a strange clause, one that let Aspiration cancel the deal if Leonard ever stopped being a Clipper. A curious condition for a shoe endorsement. Now you need to understand why that matters. The salary cap is the one rule that stops the richest owner in the league from simply outspending everyone and buying a superstar. Every team gets the same ceiling. That is the whole point. The allegation is that Ballmer's Clippers used a green bank, one Ballmer himself was pouring tens of millions into, as a side door to pay their superstar money the cap would never have allowed. And the timing in those documents is hard to ignore. According to the reporting, a Clippers minority owner put nearly $2 million into Aspiration, just 9 days before Aspiration sent a payment to Kawhi's company. Money goes in from the owner's side, money comes out to the player. If that is what actually happened, it is not an endorsement. It is a laundering with a tree logo on it. Everyone named denies all of it, and their denials belong in this story. Kawhi Leonard says he understood his obligations, did nothing wrong, and points out that when Aspiration went bankrupt, it actually still owed him about $7 million. The Clippers say neither Ballmer nor the team circumvented the cap, that they did not funnel money to Kawhi Leonard, and that they were simply victims of what they call a house of cards. Steve Ballmer says he had no knowledge of the endorsement deal and only introduced the two sides. Aspiration's former chief executive says the contract had 3 full pages of real obligations. None of it is proven. Nobody from the Clippers, and not Kawhi Leonard, has been charged with a crime or sanctioned by the league. Joe Sanberg went to prison for defrauding investors, not for anything to do with basketball. But the NBA is not letting it go. In September of 2025, it hired one of the most feared law firms in the country to investigate the Clippers. Its investigators have now interviewed Leonard, Ballmer, and Sanberg himself. A separate group of 11 Aspiration investors has sued Ballmer directly, making the same accusation the league is chasing. And the stakes are already visible on the court. In June of 2026, the Clippers agreed to trade Kawhi Leonard to Toronto. Then the trade was frozen, put on hold, because the league's investigation is not finished. So here's where it stands. One man is going to prison for 14 years for a fraud that is beyond dispute. And a separate question, the one that pulled in a superstar and a $100 billion owner, is still sitting on the desks of NBA investigators, unanswered. Think about the shape of it. A company that sold environmental virtue as its entire identity turned out to be one of the dirtiest stories in modern finance. It faked its trees, faked its customers, faked its cash, and the cleanest thing about the whole operation was the marketing. Aspiration sold the idea that you could do well by doing good, that your money could be pure. In the end, it laundered its own numbers, and it may have helped launder something else entirely. The figure that matters most here is not $248 million or $28 million or $60 million. As of today, it is 0. That is how many people connected to the Clippers have been charged or punished for the thing everyone is actually talking about. Maybe that number stays 0. Maybe it does not. The league is deciding right now. And that is the Racket. If you like watching the money move from the boardroom to the locker room, subscribe. The Racket puts out a new one every week. Somebody has to keep score.